I was stranded in the Australian outback. Something hunted me. The morning sun is just beginning to crest the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow over Carragini National Park. I feel a mix of excitement and apprehension as I load my Land Cruiser for my first solo patrol. I check my gear one last time. Radio, check. Map, check. Water and supplies, all accounted for. I climb into the driver's seat and start the engine, the sound breaking the morning stillness. This park, with its rugged terrain and untamed beauty, is now my responsibility. The Australian outback stretches out before me, vast and unyielding. I can't help but think about how far I've come to be here. With a sense of nostalgia, I reach into the glove compartment and pull out a weathered, leather-bound notebook. Flipping it open, I'm greeted by a collage of notes, sketches, and photographs. More than half of the photos feature me and my father in various outdoor settings, snapshots of our shared adventures. My parents divorced when I was just a kid, so my life was split between their two worlds. Growing up, I spent the weekdays with my mom in the stifling urban sprawl of Perth. But the weekends were my escape. My dad would come whisk me away to a different reality. We'd go exploring the national parks all across Western Australia, hiking through dense bushland and camping under starlit skies. The trips were a much-needed escape from the confines of city life and the constant tension between me and Mum's new boyfriend, Mark, a prick who could never seem to hide his disdain for me. The feeling was mutual. As I flip through the images, I see myself growing up, from a curious child in awe of the natural world to a teenager, more confident and assured, always by my dad's side. One particular photo catches my eye. It's of me, at about 9 or 10 years old, around the time of the divorce. I'm standing with Dad by a serene lake, our smiles as wide as the horizon behind us. We're proudly holding up a fish we caught together. I gently turn the photo over. There, in my dad's familiar, slanted handwriting, is a message that strikes a chord in my heart. The wilderness is where you'll find yourself. The last photo in the collection, taken on the weekend of my 15th birthday, is one I rarely look at, but today, I feel compelled to. We're sitting on a rocky outcrop, our faces turned towards the setting sun. Dad's arm is around my shoulders, and I'm leaning into him, a half smile on my face. But it's his expression that catches my eye. There's a shadow that hangs over him. He was a man haunted by demons that he never spoke with me about, and that I was always too afraid to ever ask. Despite the darkness that seemed to cling to him, my love for him was unwavering. His complexities, in a way, made me love him more. He was my rock, my constant in a sea of change. In my heart of hearts, I had convinced myself that it would always be the two of us, father and daughter, side by side, against the world. The crackle of the radio startles me out of my reverie. The voice of my supervisor's familiar, gruff voice fills the cabin. "Arnhem, do you read me?" I pick up the radio and press the button, my voice steady but with an undercurrent of anticipation. "This is Ranger Arnhem, reading you loud and clear." "What's the good word, Big Mike?" "Just checking in to see if you're all set for your solo excursion," Big Mike replies. "Yeah, all good here." "Just about to head out," I smile, appreciating his concern. "Remember, kiddo, this park's a wild place. Keep your wits about you and don't take unnecessary risks," he advises. "Absolutely. I promise I won't do anything you wouldn't," I reply with a playful tone that elicits a chuckle on the other end. "Good, that's what I like to hear. And hey, Willow," he adds, a hint of warmth breaking through his usually stoic demeanor, "your old man would be proud of you. You've got this." A lump forms in my throat at his words. In a lot of ways, becoming a park ranger was my attempt to stay connected with my dad in the only way I knew how. "Thanks, BM. I'll report back by late afternoon." "Arnhem, out," I say, signing off. As I navigate the rugged tracks winding through the park, the sun climbs higher, casting sharp shadows across the red earth. The landscape is breathtaking, with gorges slicing through the terrain and ancient rock formations standing as silent witnesses to time. Several uneventful hours into my patrol, the landscape unfolds in a familiar rhythm: red earth, towering gorges, and the occasional wildlife. It's a typical day in Karajini, tranquil yet alive with the whispers of nature. However, as I approach the remote area near Wino Gorge, something catches my eye. It's a subtle disturbance, a flicker of movement or a shade out of place, hard to discern at first, but unmistakably unusual. Wino Gorge, while known for its breathtaking views, is rarely visited, its beauty guarded by the ruggedness of its terrain. It could be anything: a lost hiker, a rare animal sighting, or perhaps just a trick of light and shadow. But as a park ranger in this unforgiving expanse, every possibility warrants attention. Curiosity piqued, I decide to take a detour to investigate. The stillness is shattered by the ominous rumble of shifting earth. My eyes dart upwards, catching sight of a massive boulder breaking free from the cliff above. Time seems to slow as I watch it tumble, gaining momentum, its path unmistakably aimed at my Land Cruiser. My heart pounds in my chest, a primal instinct to survive kicking in. Gripping the steering wheel, I swerve the vehicle with all the might I can muster. The landscape blurs as I make a desperate attempt to evade the impending collision. But the boulder, like a relentless predator, seems to follow my every move. The distance between us rapidly closes. With a final, futile twist of the wheel, I brace for impact. The world erupts into chaos. The deafening crash of metal against stone reverberates through the air. The 4x4 lurches violently, throwing me against my seatbelt as the world outside spins in a dizzying whirl of red dust and shattered glass. The airbags deploy with a force that feels like a punch to my chest and face, their rapid inflation cushioning the brutal impact. For a moment, everything is white and suffocating, the smell of propellant strong in my nostrils. My ears ring from the loud pop of the airbags and the thunderous crash of the boulder. Pain sears through my body as the vehicle comes to a jarring halt, tossed aside like a toy in the wake of the boulder's destructive path. I struggle to catch my breath, the air thick with dust and the acrid scent of burning rubber. I groan, a deep-seated pain throbbing in my head. My hand instinctively goes to my forehead, feeling the wetness of blood seeping through my fingers. Bloody hell! I mutter under my breath, the words barely audible over the ringing in my ears. I try to orient myself amidst the wreckage. The vehicle is crumpled, its frame twisted in an unnatural contortion. My head throbs, and my vision swims, but the urgency of the situation propels me forward. I quickly check myself for injuries. Apart from a throbbing pain in my head and a few bruises, I seem okay. The car, however, is another story. It's totaled, a twisted mass of metal and shattered glass, with smoke billowing from the hood. I fumble for the radio, my hands shaking. "Base, this is Ranger Arnhem," I croak, hoping the radio survived the crash. Static crackles in response, a sign that communication might still be possible. "I've been in an accident near Wino Gorge. Need immediate assistance." The radio remains silent, leaving me with a sinking feeling of isolation. Panic rises in my chest. I'm tens of kilometers away from the nearest ranger station in a rarely patrolled part of the park. My water supply is limited, and with the harsh sun climbing higher, the heat becomes suffocating. The old fear, that gnawing sense of abandonment, starts creeping back, threatening to paralyze me. It's a ghost I thought I'd left behind, but here, in the vastness of the outback, it looms large once more. But I fight against the rising tide of panic. I close my eyes, take a deep breath, and focus on what I can control. "You can do this, Willow," I say to myself through clenched teeth. I recall the survival training I underwent as part of my ranger induction, the countless hours of first aid, navigation, and emergency response drills. With a grimace, I try to push the car door open. It creaks and resists, a reminder of the force of the crash. As I exert more pressure, a sharp pain shoots through my arm, causing me to wince. Carefully, I assess my wrist. It's swollen and tender. I suspect it's sprained, maybe even fractured. I awkwardly maneuver out of the driver's seat, grabbing the first aid kit as I do so. Sitting on the ground, I lean against the vehicle, trying to steady my breathing. I give myself a more thorough examination, checking for other injuries I might have missed in the initial shock. The throbbing in my head is intense, and I feel a warm trickle of blood down my temple, maybe a concussion. There's a deep cut on my leg from the collision. It's bleeding, but not profusely. I clean the wounds as best as I can with the limited supplies in the kit and bandage them tightly. The pain in my wrist is persistent, but I manage to wrap it in a makeshift splint. As I sit there, gathering my thoughts, I remember passing a waterfall a few kilometers away on my patrol route. The thought of its shade and fresh water gives me a sliver of hope in this dire situation. I know I need to get there if I want to increase my chances of survival. Gathering my wits, I turn my attention to the GPS mounted on the dashboard, hoping for a glimmer of guidance. But my heart sinks as I find it damaged beyond use, its screen a spider web of cracks, lifeless and unresponsive. I turn to the glove compartment, rummaging through its contents until my fingers find the familiar, slightly worn edges of a map. Laying it flat on the hood of the damaged vehicle, I try to pinpoint my current location. Using landmarks I remember passing, like the distinctive shape of a nearby gorge and the direction I was heading, I estimate my position. It's not exact, but it should be close enough. I trace the contours and landmarks with my finger. The waterfall is marked clearly, a blue squiggle amidst a sea of browns and greens. I plot my course, mentally calculating the distance and the direction I need to head. The sun, now a fiery orb in the sky, will be my guide. I need to head east, towards the rising sun, then veer slightly north. Gathering my strength, I stand up, wincing at the sharp pain in my leg and wrist. I grab my backpack and fill it with supplies from the car, water canteens, emergency rations, a small survival kit, and most importantly my notebook. It's not much, but it's something. I put on a pair of sunglasses and a hat to shield myself from the relentless sun. I scour the area around the wreck, searching for anything that could serve as a makeshift walking stick. After a few minutes of searching, I find a sturdy, fallen branch. It's not perfect, but it's solid enough to support my weight and help me maintain my balance. The trek is grueling, each step a test of endurance. My sprained wrist throbs with every movement, and the cut on my leg stings sharply, but I push through the pain. The rugged terrain is unforgiving, with rocky outcrops and uneven ground making the journey more challenging. As I walk, I can't help but think of my dad. The stories he told me of his adventures in the wild, the tips he gave me for surviving in harsh conditions, they all come flooding back. I realize now how much those weekend excursions with him were not just about bonding, but also about preparing me for moments like this. Every few hundred meters, I come to a stop, taking sips from my canteen, rationing the precious water to make it last as long as possible. The sun relentlessly beat down on me, causing sweat to pour from my brow and evaporate instantly in the arid air. Each pause is also an opportunity to check the compass from my survival kit to ensure that I'm still heading in the right direction. As I trudge on, a nagging sensation begins to gnaw at the edges of my consciousness. It's a feeling of being watched, a prickling at the back of my neck that I can't quite shake off. At first, I dismiss it as the jitters, but the feeling persists. I catch fleeting glimpses of shadows moving at the edge of my vision, too quick to be just tricks of light. Every rustle of the underbrush, every snap of a twig sends a shiver down my spine. It's as if the landscape itself is watching me, a silent stalker just out of sight. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, I reach the waterfall. The sound of cascading water is a welcome relief. The shade provided by the surrounding trees offers a respite from the searing sun. I collapse near the water's edge. I crawl towards the water, the sound of it a soothing balm to my frazzled nerves. I carefully unscrew the cap of my canteen and dip it into the clear, cool water, filling it to the brim. The water is pristine, a lifeline in the unforgiving environment. I take a cautious sip, letting the liquid refresh my parched throat. The heat is relentless, and my body aches for relief. With a deep breath, I begin to strip off my dusty, sweat-soaked clothes. Each movement is a challenge with my injuries, but the thought of the cool water on my skin spurs me on. I leave my clothes in a neat pile on the rocks and step gingerly into the water. The shock of the coolness is immediate, sending shivers through my overheated body. I wade deeper, submerging myself up to my shoulders. The water soothes my aching muscles and the sting of my injuries. I immerse my head, letting the water flow over me, washing away the dust and fear that clung to me since the crash. Floating there, I close my eyes and let the water cradle me, a temporary escape from the pressing reality of my situation. But there's no time to linger. I have to be practical, to think about survival. I emerge from the water in dress. I redo my bandaging, making sure they're secure. While I sit there, drying off in the sun, I start to formulate a plan. I know they'll send out a search party once I don't report back, but with the vastness of the park, it could be a while before they find me. I need to make myself as visible as possible. As the sun begins its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I find a suitable spot near the waterfall to set up a temporary camp. I clear the ground of debris and lay down a layer of leaves and branches to sit on. Gathering stones, I create a small circle for a fire, ensuring it's far enough from the trees and brush to prevent any risk of a wildfire. The process of starting a fire is arduous, especially with my injured wrist, but I persevere. Using a lighter from my survival kit, I finally manage to spark a flame. I feed the fire with small twigs and branches, watching as the flames grow stronger. As the temperature drops rapidly, I wrap myself in a thermal blanket, huddling close to the fire's comforting glow. Underneath the star-studded sky, I can't help but feel a sense of vulnerability. The vastness of the wilderness and the isolation it brings are both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Yet, the fire serves as a beacon of hope, a signal to any rescue aircraft that may be scouring the park for me. As night falls, the sounds of the outback become more pronounced. The distant calls of nocturnal animals, the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the continuous murmur of the waterfall create a symphony of wilderness. I take out my notebook and a pen from my backpack and start to write. I jot down my location, the details of the accident, and my current situation. I note the direction I walked from the crash site and any landmarks I passed and cross-reference them on my map. After a while, I set aside the notebook and focus on staying warm and alert. I periodically add wood to the fire, ensuring it keeps burning throughout the night. I wrap myself in my thoughts, the crackling of the fire a soothing backdrop, when suddenly, a rustling sound cuts through the silence. It's coming from the dense brush just beyond the firelight's reach. I tense up, every muscle in my body on high alert. You've no doubt seen all those memes about how Australian wildlife is out to murder you. While mostly gross exaggerations, there's always a kernel of truth in them. The outback is home to some of the most unique and, yes, potentially dangerous creatures in the world. My mind races through the possibilities. Could it be a snake? A dingo, perhaps? Or something larger? The rustling grows louder, more insistent. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerges. For a moment, my heart leaps into my throat. But it's not a predator. It's a joey, a young kangaroo, a male by the looks of it. His eyes wide with curiosity as he cautiously approaches the firelight.